Okay, so hi, I'm Megan, and I'm going to be covering the section of the chapter that deals with solid waste management. So first, what is solid waste? Municipal solid waste is the solid waste produced at residences and commercial and industrial establishments. It is not construction waste, demolition debris, automobile bodies, municipal sludge, combustion ash, or industrial process waste, although those items may be disposed of at the same facilities. And in the bottom corner, I have this diagram that's taken from the EPA that just shows the breakdown of the solid waste produced in the United States. So that might be something interesting to take a look at. And then this big number is basically why we should care about dealing with solid waste. $6 million is how much the LA School District spends on disposing of its 60,000 tons of trash produced annually. So that's a whole lot of money, and that's one of the main reasons that it is a concern for so many businesses. So how do we address this issue? We address it with an integrated solid waste management system, and that is the complementary use of a variety of waste management practices to safely and effectively handle the integrated solid waste stream with the least adverse impact on human health and the environment. And you can see in the diagram below that our philosophy on how we deal with this and how we handle it has changed drastically. We used to not really worry about it and just dump it in the landfill and, think that someone else would deal with it later down the line. But we are quickly running out of space in our landfills. And so that theory has been flipped to focus more on reducing the volume of trash and recycling whenever possible, so that landfilling is used as a last resort. So source reduction is one of the main ways that we can help reduce the volume of trash going into landfills, and that's going to deal with the elimination of single-use containers and double packaging. It's going to involve phasing out materials that are not recyclable and donating leftover food to programs that feed the homeless. And I've included here a picture of Clif Bar's new packaging. It's a bit difficult to see, but on the top it does say 10% less packaging, same size bar. So that's just an example of a pretty well-known company who is already working on reducing the amount of waste produced by removing excess packaging when possible. So recycling is going to be the other really big component in helping to reduce the flow of waste. Recycling is the series of activities by which discarded materials are collected, sorted, processed, and converted into raw materials and then used in the production of new products. And I've included a couple common recycling symbols. The first one, just the arrows, means that a product is recyclable, but these symbols are used nationally, so it's important to check with local regulations and things to see if you can actually recycle that item in your community. The second one, that is the arrows within the circle, that means that a product is produced using recycled materials, and if there is a percentage in the middle of that, that will indicate the percent of the product that is produced from recycled materials. And the last diagram with the numbers, those numbers will indicate the ease with which a product can be recycled. So the lower the number, the easier it is to recycle. The higher the number, the more difficult. So why is recycling important? It helps to conserve natural resources. It helps reduce the quantity of waste going into landfills. It reduces energy costs and pollution. It reduces the amount of waste dumped into water sources, forests, and deserts, and it helps to prevent groundwater contamination. So recycling committees are committees that will go into organizations and they will implement a recycling program. They will train staff and customers on how to recycle items within that facility, and then will communicate regarding issues that arise. And so I've just included a screenshot of the website for App State's recycling committee, and this committee helps the university and the entire town of Boone to become more educated and aware of what they're able to recycle and how we can all work to recycle more items. And so the Steel Recycling Institute is something that the book mentioned because all food service operations are going to be producing some sort of steel waste that usually comes in the form of number 10 cans, which are shown on the bottom of the screen. And the steel industry really needs us to recycle steel. They need the old steel that is recycled to produce new steel. And now, excuse me, about 66% of the steel in the US is recycled. So it's a pretty important thing for us to all think about, especially those of us who work in the food service industry. And I've just included the steps to recycling steel cans on the screen. You would just first rinse cans to remove food particles, then flatten them just to reduce the volume of cans in storage, because they usually will be in storage for quite some time before they get delivered to the recycling facility. And then you would recycle the cans through your local operations. So composting is another way that you can help to reduce food waste. Composting is the biological decomposition of organic materials by microorganisms under controlled aerobic conditions to a relatively stable humus-like material called compost. And you may have noticed that I have aerobic in all caps. That is because when organic food waste is thrown into landfills, it decomposes anaerobically and produces methane gas, which is extremely damaging to the ozone layer, much more so than the carbon dioxide that it would produce otherwise. And so this compost is usually used as fertilizer, and it reduces waste and improves soil quality and reduces landfill waste and air pollution. And I've included the logo for Hilton Hotels and Resorts because there were several Hilton hotels that started a composting program, and they not only reduced the waste that they were producing, they saved on costs because they weren't having to have so much trash hauled away, and they were also able to sell the compost that they were producing to local farms, so they were getting involved in their community, and that was something really great. So just some non-compostable items in case you wanted to start composting at home. You can't compost dairy products, fish and meat scraps, bones, peanut butter, or other oily products. And I've just included a picture of what a compost bin would look like. You can see that it's made with a thinner plastic and has some aeration to, again, allow that aerobic decomposition instead of the anaerobic that would occur in landfills. So another way that you can reduce organic food waste is by using it as animal feed. So this can be a little bit tricky at times because you will have to alter it to fit the dietary requirements of the animal. With pigs, it's a lot easier. They can eat most things. You can probably just give it straight to them. But for cattle and things, you would have to add something to reduce the moisture content and add protein and all of these things, and it becomes more of a complicated process. So incineration and landfilling is another way that we deal with waste, and I've put it a lot further in the presentation because it is sort of a last resort at this point. Incineration reduces volume and produces energy from the trash that it's dealing with, and landfill space is being filled very rapidly, and so this has spurred the use of machines to reduce the volume of waste. So I've just included some examples. You can see a cardboard crusher, a glass crusher that will actually reduce the volume of waste of glass by 1/12. It'll be 1/12 of its original size. And it also increases safety because it produces a blunt gravel that won't cut you. And then the last one is just an example of the can crusher that will again help to reduce the volume of waste. Fat to fuel is another really interesting way to deal with some of this waste. So old cooking oil can actually be made into biodiesel using a very simple process. You just have to add some hydrogen in a catalyst and boom, there you go. It's also very efficient because you only need a little more than a gallon of cooking oil to get a gallon of biodiesel. And I have actually seen this work. My neighbor in my hometown used to drive a car that was powered by biodiesel. He would collect old fry cooking oil from local fast food places, and he would make the biodiesel, and he would fuel his car with it, and it was really cool, and also always smelled like French fries when he drove by. Fun fact. Facility waste assessment is something that you can do to establish an understanding of the current purchasing and waste generation and disposal practices at a facility. So this would identify potential waste reduction options for you. And ways to perform this would just, you would collect all the waste generated from the opening to closing. Then you would sort that by the type of waste, and then you would weigh each category of waste to figure out, you know, what the breakdown of the waste that you're producing is. And if you didn't want to do that, you could also do a waste audit, which collects random samples of waste over the course of a week and then analyzes those samples to get a rough idea of what the breakdown would usually be. And then finally, we just have our discussion question. That is, which renewable resource is the best for our society to focus on, and how would this choice affect our standard way of living?